Hyper Armor. One of Elden Ring's most maddening, convoluted, and unintuitive mechanics, Hyper Armor will never cease to generate question after question. Why did that poise break me? How much poise do I need to armor through that attack? How much poise damage does that attack do? What frame does my Hyper Armor kick in? These are just a small amount of questions that players such as myself have continually asked ourselves throughout the game's lifespan. Luckily, many dedicated Elden Ringers have come up with the solution to many of these questions. With the help of poise breakpoint testing, poise damage charts, and hyper armor calculators, we can begin to actually quantify the answers to the questions that we so desperately need solved. Most casuals like myself have only really dipped our ankles into the metaphorical ocean that is Elden Ring's poise and hyper armor mechanics, and for most casuals, that will remain the extent to which we lower ourselves into said ocean. To the Elden gamers that can't get enough of the L2 button, this video is for you. Before we continue, I should explain the basics of Elden Ring's active hyper armor system. At face value, when using an attack that has active hyper armor frames, there are 3 levels of hyper armor that are applied to your character during certain attacks. For the sake of simplicity, we'll refer to these as Hyper Armor Level 1, Level 2, and Level 3. Hyper Armor Level 1, being the lowest value, grants you the least amount of poise during certain attacks. These attacks are crouching light attacks, rolling light attacks, running light attacks, backstep light attacks, and jumping light attacks. Hyper Armor Level 2, being the middle level, grants you more poise than Level 1, but less poise than Level 3. Hyper Armor Level 2 is granted during standing light attacks, standing heavy attacks, running heavy attacks, and jumping heavy attacks. Hyper Armor Level 3 is the highest level of active hyper armor you can attain without the use of an Ash of War or weapon skill. As such, it grants the most poise of the other 2 levels. Level 3 Hyper Armor is granted only when you fully charge a heavy attack. Remember that these only apply to attacks that have active Hyper Armor built into them. Great swords, for example, have active Hyper Armor built into their 2-handed movesets, but feature no active Hyper Armor on their 1-handed movesets. Things get a little fucky once we add Ashes of War into the mix. And with the basics out of the way, we can finally get to what this video is really about. Displayed here is a tier list of active hyper armor values granted to all Ashes of War in the game. The top consisting of ashes that are granted active super armor, and the very bottom which grants no armor of any kind, with numerical values sandwiched between them. As it turns out, active hyper armor can affect the amount of poise you are granted in a few ways. Depending on the Ash of War, it can momentarily change your poise to a set number such as 1,350, 500, 350, 300, 250, 200, 180, or 150. Or it can use either Hyper Armor Level 3 or Level 2 for its active Hyper Armor calculation, again depending on the Ash of War. I've separated all of them by tiers for the sake of visuality. Super Armor tier consists of Lion's Claw, Ground Slam, Golden Slam, Storm Assault, and Endure. It is important to note that while these numbers are mostly correct, there are some inconsistencies present in the data displayed by Cheat Engine. For example, Storm Assault supposedly only grants you Level 3 Hyper Armor. However, when we actually test this in-game, we can't be poise broken once we go airborne. This is what confuses me about Stamp. More on that in the next tier. The beginning part of Stamp momentarily changes your poise to a value of 1,350. To my knowledge, no other Ash of War grants you this much poise. It might as well be super armor. I have yet to find anything that can poise break the beginning of Stamp that doesn't include being simultaneously hit by Giant Hunt and the follow-up attack of Starcaller's Cry. My theory with this inconsistency is that in-game, you might have 1,350 poise, and super armor during this move, as super armor is not displayed in Cheat Engine, but it's present in-game. The highest amount of numerical poise you can get is 500, which is not enough to armor through a ruptured crystal tier. Earthshaker, Golden Land, Eruption, Prelate's Charge, Stamp Upward Cut, Troll's Roar, and Waves of Darkness all cause your character's poise to immediately jump to 500, regardless of what weapon you're using. Pretty handy for fighting larger weapons like colossal swords and colossal weapons. Prayerful Strike is the only Ash of War that ups your poise to 350. There are some other oddities like this one further down the list, so don't be surprised at some Ashes of War being put in their own tier. The heavy attacks of Warcry, Barbaric Roar, and Braggart's Roar will all boost your poise up to 300 poise. The shouts themselves offer no poise other than your passive poise. Fully charged or uncharged, they stay the same at 300 either way, which I found weird as it goes against one of the most commonly found occurrences in Elden Ring, being the increase in poise when you fully charge a heavy attack with hyper armor. Storm Stomp boosts your poise up to 300 as well. Either follow-up attack of Wild Strikes will boost your poise up to 300 like the rest. The stance itself, however, grants a different amount of poise. Horalu's Earthshaker will boost your poise up to 250. This is pretty handy considering you can put this on any infusible weapon that doesn't have hyper armor of any kind. This is the only Ash of War that grants a poise value of 250. Gravitas and Lightning Ram both boost your poise up to 200. Like Horalu's Earthshaker, getting a poise boost of 200 while using a small weapon like a straight sword can catch your opponent off guard if they're not ready to lose a trade to said straight sword. Wild Strikes, only the stance part, will grant your character 180 poise for as long as they hold down the Ash of War button. Black Flame Tornado, Bloody Slash, Carrion Greatsword, Carrion Grandeur, Chilling Mist, Giant Hunt, Poison Mist, Sacred Blade, Spinning Slash, and Stamp Sweep all use Hyper Armor level 3 to calculate if you can withstand an attack or not. Again, this is the same poise you'll be getting if you fully charge a heavy attack. If you want to use these Ashes of War while suffering the least amount of poise breaks possible, I highly recommend stacking as much poise as possible and equip the Bullgoat's Talisman to reduce incoming poise damage. Charge Forth and Phantom Slash both use Hyper Armor level 2 in order to calculate your ability to withstand an attack. Not sure what the balance team was going for with these. Phantom Slash I can understand. It is a projectile and is quite good even without the poise. But Charge Forth? Man, that's terrible. Just why? This tier shouldn't even really be here. Most, if not all, of these Ashes of War were designed for purposes other than trading. Understandably so, although I disagree with Spinning Strikes giving you fuck all nothing when it comes to active hyper armor. This has to be a bug. It's just Wild Strikes but for halberds, yet grants no poise. I mean, look how slow this attack is. Oh, and Square Off could really do with some hyper armor. Please. Well, that's the end of the video. Hope you found some use out of this information. See you next time.